Hi, it's me again. So I am going to finish up the three-part series on homeostasis and what your body does to keep that internal balance in your body. And so we've already talked about the water balance in your body, and we talked about the temperature balance in your body, what your body does to maintain homeostasis. And now we're going to look at the glucose balance. And remember, glucose is a molecule that plants make during the process of photosynthesis. And it's really important to us because we take that glucose that was made during photosynthesis and break it down in our mitochondria in the presence of oxygen to make energy. And so our body has to maintain that balance too. So the organ that does that is actually part of the endocrine system, which we're not really going to talk about just in terms of how it affects homeostasis. And so pancreas is an organ that actually makes insulin. So that if you know anybody who is diabetic, their pancreas maybe isn't working at all. Their pancreas may make insulin. Insulin is a protein, and proteins are folded, and the folding patterns are very specific. And if the fold isn't correct, then the insulin doesn't work. And insulin is important because even though your body is breaking down the food into glucose molecules and gets it into the bloodstream and sends it to all the cells, it's a stubborn little guy. It won't go through a cell membrane by itself. The membrane won't let it. The glucose molecule has to be holding hands, so to speak, with insulin. Insulin is considered a helper molecule. So in order to get across the cell membrane to get to the mitochondrion, insulin has to be present. So here's the problem. If you eat, say, something that's high in glucose, and that could be pasta, bread, candy, pretzels, anything that has grain in it, basically, your body will digest it, will break it apart into those components. But if your pancreas doesn't make insulin, or you don't have enough insulin, the glucose level in your bloodstream is going to increase. So that you know that diabetics have to stick themselves and they have to test their blood to see what their glucose levels are. And that determines what did they take for the insulin values, how much insulin they have to take. And so for them, they are manually trying to adjust that glucose level, where if everything is working well in your body, your pancreas does that. And so you've eaten this food that is high in glucose. So say you eat cereal in the morning. And so you eat cereal, and if you look right here, the stimulus is the cereal, and it's going to stimulate your blood glucose level to rise. And so as it rises, what it does is it tells the pancreas that it needs to produce insulin. It produces insulin. And what that insulin does is it will do two things. If you are using the glucose at the time, it will combine with the glucose in your body, and it will go into the cells, and the mitochondria will turn it into energy. And so this part of the system, it says the blood glucose falls to normal range because it's being broken down because the insulin was there. So it got across the cell membranes, it broke down. What also happens is that your body, your liver, remember we said how remarkable liver is. Your liver can store a little tiny bit of that glucose. And so it stores that glucose, if you'll notice right here, is something called glycogen. And so that's sort of like your little tiny amount of stored glucose, okay? And so the insulin's doing two things. It's helping to stimulate that glucose to be stored just a little bit in your liver. It's not a lot. And it is also allowing that glucose to jump over the cell membranes to get to the mitochondria. And so the blood glucose level is going down. It's being stored as as glycogen, so that brings the glucose level down. And it's also being brought into the cells to be turned into energy. And so that's going to balance itself. And so now, once that occurs, so now you have homeostasis again. Okay. And so let's look at the other part of that. Let's just say that you had this breakfast, and for whatever reason you missed lunch. And so now your your blood glucose levels are declining. You don't have enough glucose in your body to make energy for your body's processes. So what your body's going to do is it's going to tell the pancreas, woo 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 woo, the glucose levels are low. And so what it's going to do is now it's going to stimulate the glycogen up here. Remember that glucose had a little bit of storage in the liver. So what it does is it stimulates that glycogen to break down. And so once it breaks down, you have that small amount of glucose in your bloodstream. And so it breaks down the glycogen into glucose, and then the blood glucose level rises to the normal levels again. Now, if you don't eat, once this glucose has been used, right, because it's going to come back here, you need the glucose in your body to break down to make energy. And once it goes back into making energy again, your glucose level is going to plummet. So if you don't eat something else, you're going to be back here. But guess what? You're no longer going to have this glucagon stored in your body. And so you're going to have low levels of glucose again. So if you eat something that has glucose in it, whether it's a granola bar or a bag of chips, anything that has carbohydrates in it, basically, it will zoom your blood glucose level back up. And so your body works really, really hard to maintain that. And your pancreas is important to do that. Remember, if you're diabetic, there's something wonky either with your pancreas. It could be that it's not producing insulin at all. Remember, insulin is the helper molecule that helps the glucose get across the cell membranes, or it doesn't function properly. And so this is a little bit more difficult, I think, than the other two, but it should make a little bit of sense to you if you know anybody that's diabetic, right? And what do they do first thing in the morning? They take their blood glucose levels because they're supposed to be, I think it's like if they're happy, the doctors are happy if it's between 80 and 120. But think about it. If you haven't eaten since 6 o'clock at night, and so that's why diabetics tend to have snacks before they go to bed to keep that glucose level up. So it's a very, very intricate system. It's very well balanced. And as long as your body's pancreas is healthy, it works very, very well. So I'm hoping that this didn't confuse you too much. This is the most difficult, but if you're here, it's because you want a little added something anyway, because this is an extension. So you should be proud of yourself that you pushed yourself far further than you had to go ahead into understanding this. But you will get more of this when you do endocrine system in high school. So thank you, everybody, and have a good night.